Welcome class. I am going to be doing a video on a pinched bowl. So you've already done the pinched cup, so now we're going to move on to the bowl, which is actually, I think, going to be a little easier for you. All right, so down here we have three versions. All right, here's one that is just pinched and allowed to set up. Here's one that I added one coil to, and then here's one that is finished with the white slip-on. So we're going to go through all of these, and that should get you started. All right, so here's where we're going to start. Just like when you started with the cup, you're going to start with a ball of clay about, I don't know, that's about a quarter of a pound. All right, I'm going to push my thumb into there. And like you did with the cup, you're going to try to make a foot. So I'm going to slowly start pinching. And the angle of my hands, if I do this, it's going to be going out. If I do this, it's going to be going straight up. So I'm going to kind of encourage this to go outward. There's some grass or something there. And I'm just going to pinch. I like to leave some finger marks, and you'll see what I'm going to be trying to do here is make some finger marks on the outside and try to leave the inside a little smoother. So I'm going to slowly pinch it out thinner and thinner. Now notice I'm leaving this little mass of clay down here, and that's going to be for the foot. So we move towards the top. Now I'm not working on the table like this. I'm keeping it in my palm of my hand so it doesn't become flat on the bottom, because we want it to be curved. This is going to be a bowl. I'm not worried about the top being super clean and finished looking, because at the end we're going to trim that up. Make it look nice and pretty. So go back down. So the difference here between the cup and the bowl is it's going outward, and the inside's going to have this curved interior. I'm not going to get it that much thinner. We'll do these in a couple sessions. So this is going to take you, you're going to do this, and probably depending on the humidity of your house, this might take sitting out several hours before you can put another coil on. So I don't want this to get too much thinner. Now you don't want this to be like a flat plate. You want to have this sort of curve. And I don't know if you want it too vertical. So that's why this gap between my thumb and my fingers is really what dictates that angle. So this little lump here is going to be our foot. So I do that. Make a little dent because I left a little extra clay there. And I'm just going to pinch that. And that's going to be the foot. It's not dead center. This is hand building, so things don't have to be perfect. They can be off center, they can be a little lumpy, they can be a little uneven. That's the kind of character of hand building. So there's the little foot. This could be added instead of created right on the piece, but I think this is a little faster and to me a little easier. So you have that, and it's not, to flatten it out, you're going to want to put it on the table like this and then flatten it out a bit. You can't put the coil on yet because this is way too wet. it would start to be way too floppy and collapse on you. So one thing I might do right now though is take this red rib and clean up the inside, make it a little rounder. Don't add water at this point. It's too wet. If you add water right now, it's just going to take longer for it to dry, and you won't be able to put a coil on it. So if your house is very humid, this could sit out for quite a long time. You know, but I can't put a time limit on it. I could say 4 hours, but that might be too long. So you really have to babysit it. If you're going to be gone and leaving the house for, 8 hours, I wouldn't leave it out. I would cover it up. So right now, this is pretty wet. I can, if I squeeze it, I'm going to leave a fingerprint. That's certainly not ready to put another coil on. This one has sat for probably 6 hours. And now, when I go to squeeze it with my thumb, I can't make a fingerprint, but it's still flexible. See how it's still flexible? If I did this and it didn't wiggle and it cracked, you've waited too long. So now I'm gonna add a coil to this one. See, I don't mind these little lumps. It's not sloppy looking. It shows that it was hand built. You can see finger marks from my thumb here. I'm not too worried about those. But we're gonna put a coil on this and make it a little bit bigger. I would suggest trying to put, like this one had 2 coils put on it. All right, this one only had 1. I made it a little bigger. It depends on, I would say, I would shoot for putting 2 coils on this thing to make it a little bit bigger. So to make a coil, I think coils are gonna, we've tried, I'm sure you've tried little coils now, or making coils with your cup. But what I'm doing here is we're trying to build skills so when we get to the coil project, which is the next one, you're gonna understand how to put coils on and how long to wait before you can put more coils, and actually making coils. Because making coils is a little trickier than you might think. You might think you're just rolling out lumps of clay, but it can be a little difficult. So you have some canvas at home, and I would do this depending on what you're working on. You could do it on the canvas. I took and wiped a sponge down here so it didn't have any chunks or debris. It wasn't dusty. But I'm going to start with a little bit more coil, a little bit more clay than that. All right, I'm going to roll it between my hands to get it a little bigger. And then I'm going to start rolling it on the table. The first thing that usually happens to beginners when they make coils is they flatten out and they fold over on each other, on top of one another. You'll start seeing seams like that, probably because you're pushing too hard. It really doesn't take much pressure or force to do this. So I'm starting the center and I move my hands outward. And you want that coil to make one complete revolution. If you do this, you're only that part of the coil is touching the table. I'm doing this, so the whole thing is in contact with the table. I don't want it to get too skinny, a little bit thicker than the wall that you're putting it on. So it's not a bad idea to trim this off if this is a little stiffened up, and it's also a little easier to put on, and this is also going to show you guys how thick I'm working. So I'm just going to take my knife and show you the thickness. If it's way thicker than that, you need to pinch more. So that's not even a half inch. It's like that's maybe 3/8 of an inch. All right. So I made my coil. I'm not smashing it down, but I'm just making it obviously flatter on two sides like that, barely pushing. All right, so now I'm gonna score it. Just taking a sponge, dampening that, and scoring it. This is really important. Now you don't have to dampen it like when we start making our coil project if you're using wet clay on wet clay, but this has been sitting for a while, so you do have to dampen this a little. Score it. And I'm going to score this edge. I'm just going to run the sponge down it too. Alright, now when I put this coil on, it's just on this inside edge here. It's not on the flat side, and I'm pinching it onto the piece. I'm not going to lay it on there and then join it. I'm actually pinching it right to the clay, right to the wall of this pinched bowl. Overlap it a little bit, pinch it together. Now you just have to spend some time. I like to work on the inside here and just use my thumb to get this attached really well. And then I'll flip it over and do that. So you could make quite a large bowl by just adding lots of coils. 2 is probably going to be just fine. You could make it without adding any. Now I'm just gonna see how I'm cupping this in my hand. I'm not doing it on the table. If I did this on the table and pushed down, I might collapse the whole thing. Now in a demo, I'm going to be, rushing this a little bit. I'm not going to be spending the kind of time that I would generally like to spend on it, but I'm doing my best because you can't make, I don't expect people to watch 30-minute videos. We just need to sometimes hurry this stuff along a little bit. So then I usually take the back side of this metal rib. Sometimes that seems really hard to get rid of, so you have to use a rib. That's what these are called, ribs. All right. I try to refrain from using a sponge like this, but sometimes it does help if you're trying to get this. Now, if you did have it, want to get this nice and smooth on the inside, sometimes you do have to use a little bit of water. You don't want a puddle in there, but a little bit of water can really help that. So it's got the round side, and this red one, you have a yellow one in your kit that's more rigid than this. You could try that to get a little bit more shaping, and this could be a little better for smoothing, but Now those little lines in there, sometimes your thumb does a better job getting rid of those. And you know, I would probably spend a little bit more time on this, but you get the idea. But on the outside, I think I'm just gonna say, I like those little marks. Sometimes trying to get rid of all these marks, you end up with a mess. And I think just letting them be can be a really nice textural element. So you do have another thing in here that you may need to get at the grocery store. You'll need to get some garbage bags. You're going to need to get a rolling pin, a bucket, and some Scotch-Brite scrubbies. All right, so now we're at this point. Okay. That'll have to sit for maybe another 6 hours to get to this point. So now I need to make this a little cleaner out here. I'm gonna ignore that maybe I didn't do a great job on the inside, but I'll show you how to deal with this outside edge and then talk a little bit about putting some underglaze or slip on this clay. So you're going to do that on both the cup and the bowl. You're going to put a slip on there. So I'm just using, this is the way I like to cut a rim like this, rather than setting it down and doing this. And you don't saw like you're cutting a piece of wood. You just have, you have what's called a fettling knife. There's going to be a sharp edge and a blunt edge on that knife. You can use more of the sharper edge to take off that. It's not going to be totally round, and that's just fine. And here's where you can take that Scotch-Brite. We're going to clean up that edge. And I kind of wrap it around like that. Maybe you already have one in your kitchen. I don't know. You don't need but a little teeny square. And it doesn't have to be a new one. It can be all worn out and one that's been used. All right, and then I'd go over it with the sponge. And it's a little lumpy, and that's, in my opinion, I kind of like that. The other thing you can do to finish this lip off a little bit is you could flare it out a bit. If this is still soft enough. Now if this has gotten too hard, it may crack. You know, make sure that it's still flexible. And I'm just gonna kind of put a little detail on the rim of this bowl. Just kind of use your finger, your thumb, and your pointer finger to do this here. All right. So this clay is dark, and when you go to put a clear glaze on these, it's not a very attractive color to put a clear glaze right over this. It's kind of a shiny tan in it. I think the best thing to do is to put a white slip on. Now what you have in your kit is a white slip, not a white underglaze. You have 4 primary colors, black, and then you have the white slip. The white slip is, we just used white just to save some money, and it's just a slip that we made in the classroom, but it'll work just like this. It's not bright white like this. It goes on kind of grayish, but when it gets fired, it's gonna be nice and white. So don't worry about it. And you have a couple different brushes in there. You have a wider brush and you have some narrowed brushes. So you can use a wide brush, and I'm not going to paint this whole thing, but I'm just going to give you some tips on putting underglaze or slip on a piece. So you need to do this. Don't wait till it gets bone dry. Now bone dries after it's become totally dry. Hang on, I'm going to grab a bone dry piece and show you. I thought we had something. I guess we don't. Anyways, something that's bone dry is when the clay is totally dried out, and you'll see that, and it gets kind of really fragile. And if you get it wet, when it's that fragile bone dry state, it's going to crack. So we're going to do it when it's what we call leather hard here, okay? Right after you're done cleaning it up, you're going to put this white slip on. Only go over it once. This is a kind of a stiffer brush, so it's not your best brush for the job. Here's a better brush here. Yeah, this is a way better brush. Okay, so the nice soft bristles is going to work a lot better. See now you can see the clay underneath because you're going to have to do more than one coat. This will take like an hour to dry. All right, but I'm only going to go over it once. If I go over it multiple times and keep going over and over, what you're going to do is you're going to turn your white slip into a brown slip because you're mixing the clay with the slip over and over, and you're going to have a brown slip. So I'm just going to do one shot like that, and I'm going to let it sit. This one has 2 coats on it. Now you can go and put any color you want on this. All right, but I'm starting with white. And then you can go and paint red and yellow or mix colors. There's a palette, mixing palette in your kit, so you can take and mix it like paint. If you run out of this stuff, don't worry about it. Just email me and I'll send you some more. Or you can, I won't send you some more. You can come and pick some up. All right. So we're gonna do this. I want you to try this. You don't have to do it all over the piece. You can do some selected areas, but it's a technique called sgraffito. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve through the white slip into the clay. And I'm going to just take and just do something like this. I'm not going to. So you have a carving tool in your kit. I gave everybody one. I didn't give everybody like an entire kit. I tried to give people the round one like this. So now you can just get a nice contrast between the white and the brown clay. So when you return this stuff to campus and we fire it, we're going to put clear glaze on everything. It just simplifies this whole online clay thing. All right, just something like that. That's all I'm going to do. Okay. You can get really elaborate if you wanted to. Or you can just do something simple like that.